Deleted session, July 12, 1978. Now, good evening. Rupert's impulse to take a mirror from Prentice, his impulse to call others, his call to Eleanor. All of these events represent a change of mood and the inner decisions of which Rupert is not as yet aware. He is moving out of one house. He is no longer on that center, wondering what kind of treatment he might receive at another house. And so he is moving at important psychological levels. He was willing to take a chance, therefore he was not quite as determined upon safety above all. He allowed the impulse to surface initially, and then he allowed himself to act upon it, in a sense, throwing caution to the wind. That is, he was not going to have a mirror cut in two, period, even if it meant, as he hoped it would not, that he must ship it around to many other places. The impulse allowed framework 2 to operate, pulling in new probabilities. They are not old probabilities. No probabilities are old. No matter how far into the past they may seem to go, they emerge freshly and newly at the point of activation. For Rupert, in a way, it was an expression of daring, partially the result of your suggestions, and his growing understanding that he had become not too spontaneous, but too conservative. Our sessions also helped. No one in his childhood, in his 20s, or in your early relationship ever warned him that he could become too conservative. It certainly did not seem that he was being overly cautious in any regard, and yet when his sexuality was perhaps most noticeable, he made sure he took up with a man who could not take advantage of it, a very cautious step for all of its unconventional overtones. People expect conventional behavior, so his spontaneity was then more apparent and often frowned upon. The conservative behavior that, for example, kept him a virgin into his mid-20s was never understood by others. No one, for example, would have thought him at that time a virgin. The desire to write was not conservative, but in many ways his attitude toward it became so. His attitude toward his publisher has largely been the same. Rupert is certainly not considered conservative, and yet a need for safety and security certainly added an overly heavy hand in his approach to life, particularly, of course, where the world was involved. So the affair with Eleanor is significant, particularly since the book was assured publication with Prentice. He has been concerned about a mirror. Physically, the situation is thus. The vital areas of the head are now largely being concentrated upon with healing activities. That activity is carried downward through the body, gently changing the rib area, shoulders, arms, and hands. The greatest work is now concentrated in those areas. The sore periods, and Rupert should remember this again, are of less intensity and duration. The legs, in contrast, are resting. In that quieter activity is occurring there now, as the ankles very gently are beginning to regain greater mobility. The upper portion of the body and its posture is extremely important in his walking, and again, in general, the upper or the lower portion of the body has the greater activity in healing at a given time, while the other portion is relatively now at rest. There are different periods when he will suddenly feel like walking without support, and will do so, and much more easily than before. His impulses will tell him when. In between, the healing process still continues, but the overall stage of development may not be such that will allow the kind of overall posture needed for walking without support. The main issue is, again, maintaining the thread in the body's processes and in its intent to heal, and in its ability to do so. It is natural enough in your positions to become discouraged now and then, as Rupert in particular does. When he feels that he is generally in such a mood for a day or so, he should definitely tell you about it. He is very seldom, however, in such a mood for any period, for each day now brings some definite feelings of release to his body. It is only when a particular period of soreness bothers him, Rob noted as now, they said, that he falls prey, and even then he largely cultures himself. The change in the point of power is also highly significant, for he is doing it now with a good sense of motion and imaginary, and without any feelings of contradiction. I told you that he was beginning to gain weight, and so he is. This does not mean he cannot gain more. The back area in particular is somewhat more noticeable, since the muscles are beginning to work more. The circulation is improved, veins and so forth show more, but he has begun to gain because even in the chair he moves his legs more, which has increased his appetite. The body will gain naturally as he is able to handle more weight. Some additional arm exercise, for example, will also help. For the muscles simply then demand more food. Give us a moment. The most important point is to cultivate your faith in framework 2, and for Ruber to realize that the releasing feelings in his body signify the fact that his body is indeed releasing. I realize it is very difficult not to question how much longer or when will the healing be observable enough so that there is no doubt of its most positive outcome. The answer is up to you. The faith that the outcome is assured brings it about. I realize again that is asking a bit much of you. Yet if you continue even as you are, there can and should be some very definite and tangible proof. The release of a muscle in the neck, the release of these muscles above Ruber's eyes, those are also observable proof, but only if you accept them as such. Some excellent healing took place Monday evening, and Ruber was right to relax. That healing is making possible some other improvements that have not yet shown. Again, the stress should be upon self-approval and acceptance for both of you. The only decision made in the area of work also activates physically important healing elements as far as Ruber's health is concerned. It is almost as if you hit one bell in framework 2, and 3 or 4 others also begin to ring. As far as the weight issue is concerned, Ruber's mental attitude is highly important, and the suggestions you are giving are helping. When you relax in the moment, when you do not worry, then you do not use energy needlessly. Worry and anxiety have often kept Ruber's weight down. Relaxing in the moment and enjoying the beauties of the day, as per your suggestions, is vital in that regard. Beyond writing down his feelings, for a while at least, let Ruber make a list each day of the good things that happened, or the portion of the day he enjoyed. Have he seen how many such things he can note, and this will automatically help him focus his attention in beneficial ways. It would not hurt to go over Ruber's notes once a week together. Except for the obvious physical limitations, Ruber is healthy, however, small bond. He should be, for example, wiry. And while he can indeed use more weight, your cultural idea of proper weight is somewhat exaggerated. So remember that also. Dick Barge is correct. You are affecting your times far more than you may suppose. Else how could you be so imitated? Or how could there be so many instantly manufactured sets? It seems that I spring like a genie out of each and every Ouija board. The quality of such material should show Ruber by contrast the extent of his abilities, and he should not concern himself with any such matters, as far as worrying about them is concerned. They fall by the wayside because they do not have the strength to survive. I may have some surprise for Ruber, and in the meantime, I close the session, having, I believe, covered your questions. Ralph noted, I have another question, I told Seth before he could say goodnight. It's about my dream that Sunday morning, when I was climbing the church steeple that reached way above me into the sky, only I couldn't do it and came back down. Say said, the dream is self-explanatory. You represented yourself, and yet you also represented your idea of the species in its relationship to the acquisition of any ultimate knowledge. For one thing, the dream represented an attitude. Of course, that truth was something apart from man, hopefully, to be acquired, and definitely involving an ascent. The church symbolism was also obvious, but the situation itself exists in an intellectual framework. Intellectually, non-truths are the goal, truths almost like some exotic product to be attained by man, as man searches through science or religion for ultimate answers. Such a quest indeed seems almost impossible in the framework of the dream. Then you and mankind simply could not succeed. Truth does not exist on the vertical. No particular structure of knowledge can lead you to it. This does not mean that truth is unavailable. It simply means it is not structured in the usual way, and it even means that in Framework 1 it cannot be proven. For what can be proven in Framework 1 must always be relative. In a strange fashion, the dream process in which your dream occurred was truth. The creative energy that fashioned the dream was truth, though the questioning kind of attitude you had in the dream of itself would make truth seem always unavailable. End of session, unless you have another question. Ross said, no, that was very good. Say said, then I bid you a fond good night. It was very good. It was your dream. Ross said, all right, thank you very much.